Hi there, it's Leslie again, and I hope you haven't been too busy to watch the previous 2 videos I sent you on the top 3 lies that will keep you stuck, miserable, and unable to change. Now, if you haven't seen them yet, I highly encourage you to go back and watch them now, because each one has some crucial truths you need to learn that will help you get unstuck so that you can change. In today's video, you're about to discover the most detrimental lie that keeps you afraid, insecure, and a magnet for attracting unhealthy and abusive people. For that reason, I want you to give yourself enough time to watch this video undistracted. So turn off your cell phone, give yourself the gift of about 40 minutes, take notes, and really listen, because you can heal from this core lie, and when you do, you will feel amazingly different inside. And that lie is, I'm not enough. I'm not enough to be loved, I'm not enough to be cared for, I'm not enough to be valued or protected. The lie goes even deeper. You believe that there's something fundamentally wrong with you, that you're flawed and unworthy. The technical name for this lie is shame, the unhealthy kind, and it runs so deep it affects you at the very core of who you are. And when you're smack in the middle of a shame attack, my friend and colleague Catherine Chamberlain writes this. She says you feel damned, hopeless, and helpless in your defectiveness. You feel completely unworthy as a person, disgraced, diminished, and at times destroyed. It is one of the absolute worst feelings a human being can have about herself, and it's extremely hard to shake off. I think as a child, that's what I felt when I was living in Chicago with my mom after the divorce. I felt unloved, but more importantly, I felt unlovable. There was nothing in me that made me feel lovable. My mom was distracted and busy or angry most of the time. I had no real friends, and my way of coping with my feelings of not being enough was to try harder, to be good, trying harder to do more, that I would be enough. That first lie we talked about. If only I could do more, help more, be there, make them need me in some way. No wonder I became a counselor, huh? Then maybe I would be enough. Then maybe people would want to be my friend. But the sad thing was, I could never relax in the friendship, even if I had one. Why? Because I constantly worried. What would happen if I failed, if I couldn't do something for them? What would happen if they saw the real me and I disappointed them? What would happen if they didn't need me to do something for them? There was nothing just about me that they would want. What they wanted about me was what I could do for them. Do you see how this kind of thinking makes you a magnet for people who will use you up and rub your nose in your own internal lie that you're not lovable or worthy? If you don't perform or measure up or please them, or you're not perfect, or you keep trying harder and knock yourself up to somehow to earn their love or attention, and then you keep trying and overfunction again and again and again, because to stop puts you back in this, I'm not worth being loved and valued for just who I am. And that feeling is so much worse and more painful than the exhaustion you get from overfunctioning. That's why you don't stop your overfunctioning and people-pleasing, because you're scared that if you do, that thought and that feeling of I'm not enough will begin to rear its ugly head again and fill you with utter despair. Now, most women I know and work with struggle in some way or another with this internal feeling of not being enough, at least some of the time. So even though I talked about this in the webinar, I want to review where it comes from. As I said, God designed human beings to connect with other human beings. Right from the start of a baby's life, that little baby naturally looks into her mom's eyes and she asks the question, who am I, Mommy? Now, ideally, the mother and child interact in a positive way and the baby begins to get a sense of herself as someone who is loved and protected and valued, someone who's provided for and enjoyed and important. And this is God's plan for babies. So they experience that secure base of unconditional love, both from a mother and a father, which is a foretaste of God's unconditional love for her. This helps her start her life with a secure sense of herself. She feels that core in her being, that she's enough to receive unconditional love and acceptance. She can't do anything, and even if she cries and keeps her parents up all night, or is cranky, or vomits all night, she gets loved and cared for. And sadly, many babies don't get this kind of unconditional love and acceptance. Maybe her parents are exhausted or caring for 6 other children or working full-time or taking care of elderly parents, or they might be mentally ill or distracted with work or Facebook and other interests, church, drug addiction, immature, having marriage problems, all kinds of things. They just might be checked out. And truth be told, even the best parents get tired and blow it and act sinfully toward their children. So no child escapes family life without a few nicks to her sense of self. But in addition to parents and their role in a child's life, our sense of self continues to be shaped as we interact with our siblings and go to school and make new friends and get on a sports team and learn new skills and become more aware of the world and people around us. And as we grow, we look into the eyes of other people, like our teachers and our coaches and our friends and our boyfriends and our mentors and our husband, our bosses, our pastors, and we ask the question, well, who do you say that I am? Now, in the webinar, I talked about a woman named Sharon. Now, Sharon grew up in a loving home environment and felt very confident and secure as a 10-year-old. However, her father lost his job and her mom started working full-time to help support the family, and she could no longer homeschool Sharon. And when Sharon started the 6th grade of the public school, her peers were a group of mean girls who teased and made fun of Sharon throughout junior high. Now, Sharon's mother went to the principal to see how this could be fixed, but the girls continued to subtly ridicule and reject Sharon. Now, for any child, a bullying person in their life is a horrible experience. But Sharon began to identify with what the girls were saying about her. She began to believe their lies, that she was ugly or fat and stupid, a loser, undesirable as a person and a friend, as well as a female. And the bullies affected not only how she felt, but also how she began to see herself. And this had a huge impact on Sharon's sense of herself, and she began her high school years feeling very insecure and believing the lie that she wasn't enough to be valued. In high school, Sharon's physical education teacher noticed that Sharon was an exceptionally fast runner, and she suggested that Sharon try out for the track team. And the teacher put in a good word for her with the coach. And this made Sharon feel accepted. And when she got on the team, she excelled. And by the end of her high school years, Sharon had set the school record in the 50-yard dash. And she received an athletic scholarship to a top university for track. Now, Sharon made a few good friends in high school. And she was asked to her senior prom by one of the most popular guys in high school. And so during these years in high school, Sharon's sense of self again began to change. Now I'm enough, she thought, and she felt more confident and competent and valuable. Later on, when she went to college, her junior year of college, Sharon seriously injured her leg in an automobile accident and could no longer run in track, and so she lost her scholarship. And that nagging feeling that she wasn't enough again returned. You see, whether you or I succeed or fail, whether we're popular or rejected, when you base your value and worth on external sources rather than what God says, then your sense of yourself will always shift like sand, leading to an unstable, anxious sense of who you are, whether you're enough. Now, if you find yourself in that place right now, please don't beat yourself up, because the Bible warns us that this is going to happen. It warns us that just by nature, we automatically and even unconsciously believe lies rather than God's truth. And what that means for you and for me is that we all listen to false voices, and we all tend to build our identity on shaky foundations rather than what God says. Now remember, God designated your parents to give you an initial sense of who you are. However, ultimately, if you're going to grow strong and secure as a woman in who you are, your Creator must have the final word. He's the only one who fully knows you, who you are, and who you were made to become. He's the only one who will always tell you the truth, who never changes, and who loves you unconditionally all of the time. But instead of looking to God to tell us who we are, as fallen human beings, we tend to seek those external sources to tell us who we are. And those other voices are screaming louder. And when we do that, instead of feeling secure and loved, we become self-conscious and afraid. Now, I've identified 6 common false voices that you allow you to define your worth and value. I do too. I've already alluded to some of these essential external voices in the previous 2 videos. And as a Christian counselor and coach, I've worked with hundreds, if not thousands, of women over the years to heal from this lie that we're not enough. But I also had to do the work myself to not only see myself differently, which is my self-image, but to feel differently about myself inside, which was my self-esteem. So the following are the 6 areas where women tend to seek their sense of worth and value. Now, on the surface, it can be misleading because they don't look sinful or harmful. However, when you depend on these things to define you, you will be deceived, confused, and anxious because they're shaky foundations in which to base your identity, value, and worth. And when you listen to these external voices, you'll also forfeit the opportunity to grow into the woman that God's designed you to become. Now, the first 2 voices or foundations we've already talked about in video 1. They are popularity and performance. These 2 lies keep you trying harder to be enough and trying harder to do enough so that people will like you or that you will feel worthy. So I'm not going to repeat what I shared in the first video here, but depending on other people to define who you are is a scary and unstable place to rest your self-worth. But let me quickly share with you 4 other areas where we tend to let other people tell us who we are, and those foundations to feel worthy are also false. They're false foundations that create an internal sense of anxiety instead of freedom and stability. The first one is having more stuff or possessions. I went into that a little bit in video 2 when I talked about the feeling that I don't have enough or I deserve more. For example, I know a woman who describes everything she owns in terms of the brand. She says things like, oh, I just bought a new BMW, or, oh, I love Kate Spade purses, or, I'm so happy my husband brought me a new Rolex watch for my birthday. Now, I think what she's trying to say to herself and other people is, because I can own these things, because I can own a Kate Spade purse, that must make me worthy. That must make me attractive or special or valuable. Now, please don't understand what I'm saying here. I enjoy owning nice things. Maybe you do too. But having them or not having them does not define me or change the way I feel about myself. I'm the same person in Target workout clothes as I am in Nike gear. If I have nice things or I don't have nice things, that's not a statement about me, nor is it a statement about you. Now, if you're not sure whether you're stuck in this lie, ask yourself if you overspend on things you don't need just to feel better about yourself. Or maybe, do you have way more stuff than you use or need, but have a hard time getting rid of it? If so, it might be a sign that you use possessions as a status symbol to make you feel like you're enough. Or the lack of possessions can produce the feeling in you that you're not enough. Maybe you tell yourself that you're not as good as a woman who has more. I remember a friend in our small group once. She never invited anyone of us over to her home for dinner because she told herself that her house was not as nice or as big as other couples in our small group. And we loved her. We didn't care about the size of her house, but she cared. And she allowed her small house to define her worth and allowed it to make her feel less than or not enough. Now, don't be deceived if you've embraced a minimalist lifestyle. Maybe you don't own a lot, nor do you want to, but you still may be swept up in allowing that decision to define you. By not having stuff, you tell yourself that you're doing it right, that you're more special or more godly or more spiritual than the woman who clings to her stuff. The Apostle Paul tells us that he learned to be content, living with plenty and living with very little. Possessions are for you to enjoy, but remember they can also encumber and enslave you. They are never meant to define you. Marketers would have you believe that you are worth more if you purchase what they pitch. Next time you watch TV, listen to the commercials. The tagline in most advertising is this: you deserve it and are worth it because you need more. Remember that second lie. They promise us worthiness if we just buy what they sell. Don't fall for it. At best, it's a temporary fix, but soon you're off to the mall for the next thing you need to buy to feel like you're enough. In addition to performance, popularity, and possessions, another external lie or thing that people want to feel more worthy is power. Now, don't get me wrong, everyone wants some power in their life. At a minimum, we want the power to choose our own way, to decide what we say yes to and what we say no to. Even toddlers fight for that power when they shut their mouth tight and refuse to eat anything they don't like. As human beings, our power is limited, but everyone likes to feel competent and in control of themselves, and even in the circumstances around them. That's why living in community and with other people is so challenging, because we often feel powerless over other people's choices as well as the circumstances we're in. No one likes feeling helpless or powerless. However, when having power defines you as powerful, then you're often tempted to misuse your power, whether it's political power or physical power and strength, or sexual power, economic power, or even spiritual power. We manipulate and sometimes bully other people so we can gain control of the situation to get what we want. Now, Jesus warned those of us who have power not to misuse that power to boost our self-esteem or to serve our own selves. Being powerful, just like being popular, does not define you as a good person or more deserving or more worthy than someone who does not have those things. Adolf Hitler, the German chancellor during World War II, was powerful and popular, but he used his power and popularity for evil purposes. Power, like popularity and possessions, often distract us from God and can corrupt our heart and mind. We get deceived into believing that our power and popularity and performance and even our possessions come from our own strengths. And what happens is we start to believe the opposite lie, that we are enough in ourselves and we don't even need God. We refuse to acknowledge that everything good in us is from God. And if He's given you a position of power, you should use it wisely and for His purposes. And those who feel powerless, the weak, the helpless, the disenfranchised, victims of powerful, often feel like God doesn't see or care about their plight. They believe that they're not enough to be cherished and protected, and that's not true. Power and position often go together, such as if I'm the president of a company or a country or a leader in an organization, then that must mean I'm wise and competent. That might be true, but then again, it might not. Your professional position is only one part of who you are. You still have weaknesses. You still have a dark side that's often hidden from your own awareness. And there are sinful parts of yourself that are also parts of who you are. And those too must be acknowledged if you're to be a whole person and have a truthful self-image. Some women feel inferior or not enough because they don't have a desired position. Maybe you're not a wife or a mother or a leader, and you will allow that lack of having this particular position to tell you that there must be something wrong with you. Hear me, God knows your desire for these things, and your desire is good. But just like I desired popularity as a child and I didn't get it, there are times in life that we don't get things that we desire. And it hurts. But it is not a statement about who you are or who you're not. Never confuse your pain with your value or your identity. So we don't start to feel like we're enough from being more popular or performing enough or having more possessions or gaining more power or position or status. No, it's from not trying harder to be perfect, sinless, or flawless. You see, perfectionism comes from this internal voice that constantly tells you that if you're not perfect, you can't possibly be enough or loved. For example, everyone else can be a sinner and still be loved, but not you. Everyone else can have weaknesses and be accepted, but not you. Everyone else can make a mistake and receive grace and forgiveness, but not you. Now, it doesn't matter if you have people in your life who actually do love you and accept you. You don't accept it because all you can see are your flaws, your sins, your mistakes, and failures. You put yourself in this no-win position with this mindset. The only way you can feel good about yourself is to achieve the impossible. You have to be perfect. And when you fail, which of course you will, the result is that toxic shame and self-hatred and despair. Now, how do you know if you're caught in this lie that I have to be perfect? Listen to your internal self-talk when you mess up. Does it sound something like this? Oh, I can't believe I said that. What's wrong with me? In other words, you're never allowed to say something stupid or sinful or make a mistake. Or perhaps you say, I just can't forgive myself for what I did. I can't believe I did such a horrible thing. Let me ask you a question. Why do you have such a hard time accepting that you're a finite, fallible human being? That you're a sinner and capable of doing sinful things, like everybody else? It's because you expect yourself to be better than that. You expect yourself to not be a sinner. You expect yourself to be perfect. You see, friend, the answer to healing the internal sense of I'm not enough is never by trying hard to be enough. It's not in gaining more popularity or being more productive or having more possessions or securing more power or a coveted position or even achieving perfection. A healthy sense of self doesn't happen by focusing on yourself at all. All these paths will either lead to pride or more shame and fear because you fail to measure up. Now, if while listening to this, you've become aware of some sinful patterns in your life or some internal weaknesses that you need to work on, I hope you take it to heart and you work on them. But understand this important truth. You will never get to a place where you never have any weaknesses or flaws or sin. And after all your hard work at self-improvement, by whose yardstick will you measure that you're finally good enough, worthy enough, or acceptable enough? Usually it's going to be your own yardstick or some other fallible human being's yardstick. And that will never give you the stability or security that your heart craves, nor will you have a truthful and healthy sense of who you are. Friend, God has something better for you. So healing from a damaged self-image doesn't come from looking at yourself. And so I want to share again the story of a woman who didn't feel good about herself. She knew full well she was not enough. She could never be enough. She had 5 failed marriages, and the man she was currently living with was not her husband. Maybe that's you. She was an unpopular woman. The women of the community shunned her. She was a woman who had no power. She had no position because of her gender, her marital status, and her race. She was a Samaritan, and the Jews despised Samaritans and saw them as inferior. So let's look at how a single encounter with Jesus changed the way this woman saw herself. You can read the story for yourself in John chapter 4. It's the woman at the well. And she went to the well that day all alone to gather her daily supply of water. In the New Testament, Middle Eastern culture, women never went to the well alone. They went with other women, and they went early in the morning before it got too hot. Being there alone at noon tells us how utterly unloved and unpopular she was. Well, while she was at the well, she notices the Jewish man sitting next to the well, and he starts a conversation with her by asking her for a drink of water. This was highly unusual. Jewish people did not talk to Samaritans. They considered them garbage. Not only that, she was a woman, a Samaritan woman. He was a Jewish man, another reason for him not to speak to her. Jesus violated cultural practice by asking her for a drink of water and then engaging in a lengthy and stimulating conversation with her. And during their talk, he even offered her a valuable gift. He said, "I want to give you something, living water." Jesus engaged with this woman talking theology, talking about life and relationships, about God. And he revealed to her something he rarely shared publicly. He told her he was the Jewish Messiah. Now, he never once focused on her flaws or her failures, even though he was well aware of them, because he saw beyond them. He saw beyond her gender, her race, her status, or even her messed up life. He saw inside the woman who he created her to be. And as Jesus talked with her, the woman began to ask him questions, and Jesus took his time to answer them. Now, in her conversation with Jesus, she began to see herself differently. She was no longer just an unloved, unimportant, immoral Samaritan woman. But she also began to see, wow, I'm a person with a stimulating conversation with someone who claimed to be the Messiah. This amazing man knows everything about me. He doesn't treat me with contempt or indifference, but with dignity and respect. Their conversation brought out sides of this woman that she had long forgotten or never knew she had. Her curiosity, her inquisitiveness, her theological questions, her hunger for the truth. The Samaritan woman came to the well that day knowing full well she was not enough. She knew inside she was broken. She knew she was an immoral woman, a damaged woman, a Samaritan woman, an unwanted and unloved woman. She knew that well. But in that single encounter with Jesus, she began to see herself differently. She began to see herself as a beautiful woman, a valuable woman, a forgiven woman. Her identity went beyond what she did or didn't do, or how she felt, or what other people thought about her, or what she owned, not even what she thought about herself. Those things no longer defined her. She realized that she was more than her race and her gender, more than her education or her past. Now she knew in her heart of hearts that she was something more, and she was set free from who she thought she was, and free from what other people told her she was. Now she was free to become the woman God made her to be. And the remarkable thing about this entire story is this woman's very countenance was so transformed that when she ran back into the town the same day, shouting, "Come and see a man who told me everything I ever did," the people of the town listened to her. The same people who regularly scorned and rejected her in the morning noticed something different about this woman in the afternoon. And the Bible tells us that many people came to Christ because of the words of this woman. So what does that mean for you right now, today? Well, you've already seen that identity is formed and forged in relationship. From infancy, you need the assurance that you're deeply loved and accepted in spite of your flaws, weaknesses, and sin. You've already learned that this rock-solid assurance can never fully come from your family of origin or from your own strength, striving to be enough. It won't come from having more power, possessions, or performing better, being popular, having positions, or even being perfect, which are always too unstable to give you what your heart craves. It also can't come from other people who sometimes fail us and let us down. It can only come from the one who's perfect, the one who knows you perfectly and loves you ferociously and unconditionally. It can only come from God. Like the woman at the well, you too need a personal encounter with Jesus. Who does he say that you are? This shift from looking toward yourself or toward others to define who you are is critical to your healing. C.S. Lewis writes that the most fundamental thing is not how you think about God, but rather what God thinks of you. And how God thinks of you is not only more important, but infinitely more important. So let's look at a few passages in the Bible that help you see how God thinks of you. For example, the psalmist says, "When I look at the night sky and see the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars that you've set in place, what are mere mortals that you should care about them or think about them? Human beings that you care about them. Yet you made them only a little lower than God himself and crowned them with glory and honor. You gave them charge of everything you made, putting all things under their authority," in Psalm 8. Or how about this? "Even before he made the world, God loved you and chose you to live in Christ, to be holy without fault in his eyes. God decided in advance to adopt you into his own family by bringing you to himself through Jesus Christ. This is what he wanted to do, and it gave him great pleasure." Ephesians 1, 4 and 5. Now perhaps you've read these passages before, and nothing inside you has changed. You still feel unworthy, unloved, and not enough. You might be saying to yourself about now, I've already tried looking at what God says, Leslie. It just didn't work. Well, let me provide the missing piece. When you read what God said in the Bible, are they words on a page, or do you take them into your heart and believe them? Most of us don't need more informational truth about God or what he says, but we do need more transformational truth. And that only comes when you not only listen to what God says, but you see it crucial to your well-being and believe it with your heart. For example, imagine that someone sent you a registered letter today. Right after this video, you open it, it says that you inherited $10 million from a recently deceased uncle who you don't remember. The law firm, it looks legit, sent you this letter and they would like you to get in touch with them right away. Well, stop for a minute. How would you feel? Well, it depends on whether or not you believe the letter was legitimate. If you didn't believe it, there'd be no change in you, just toss in the trash. You'd laugh and joke, or maybe you'd be upset, but you'd throw the letter away and you certainly wouldn't feel like a millionaire. However, if you believed it, and if you found out it was true, it would definitely change you. You'd begin to feel differently, wouldn't you? Think differently, live differently. Knowing the truth isn't the same as believing the truth. The Bible tells us that it's our unbelief, not our lack of knowledge, that keeps us from experiencing the truth of what God says. In fact, Satan knows a lot of truth about God. He knows more things than you or I will ever know, but he doesn't believe it. Learning the truth won't change you, but believing it will. Jesus knows that there will always be a struggle within us to trust and believe what God says over the noise and the lies in our own head. Jesus also warns his followers about a powerful enemy at work who will accuse you and lie to you about your value and your worth. And Jesus tells you that Satan is a liar who will continually try to confuse you about what's true about God, what's true about you, and how life really works. And if you're not mindful of his strategies, you will easily fall for his lies. The Bible tells us, I, the Lord, speak the truth. I declare what is right in Isaiah 45. And Jesus tells you, my sheep know my voice. He tells us over 70 times in the Gospels, I tell you the truth. Jesus doesn't want you just to believe in him. He wants you to believe him. And the Apostle John knew the path to real change when he wrote these words. So we have come to know and believe the love that God has for us. God is love, and whoever abides in love abides in God, and God abides in him. By this, love is perfected within us so that we may have confidence for the day of judgment, because as he is, so we are also. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. For fear has to do with punishment. And whoever fears has not been perfected in love. 1 John. You see, when we know and rest on God's unconditional love and acceptance for us, we're free to let go of our fear that we're not enough. His love for you and for me does not depend on whether we're enough or not. His love is a free gift, not something you can earn, not even something we deserve. And that's a relief. If you can't earn it and you don't even deserve it, then you can never lose it, because God's love for you does not depend on you at all. You know, you can change the way you see yourself and feel about yourself when you believe and abide in the truth of what God says about you. And so I want you to start today to begin to speak God's truth to yourself instead of the lies that you're not enough. What could you say? I have value and worth to God. He says I have. I'm deeply and fully loved. He says I am. God says he desires to give me a clean slate by forgiving me and bringing me into a close relationship with him. Maybe not with my husband, maybe not with my mother, but with the God of the universe. God says I belong to him. He adopts me into his family. I'm not an orphan. I'm not alone. I'm not unloved. God tells me my life has meaning and purpose. I'm not an accident. Even if my mother or father don't love me, the creator of the universe does and has a purpose for my life. Remember, the lies you've believed for so long often have deep roots and are not always removed all at once. But God's word tells us that we change by the renewing of our mind. Therefore, it's critical that you practice speaking the truth to yourself so that you don't forget who you really are. To heal from this utter sense of unworthiness, of not being enough, comes by looking to Christ, not to others or to the world or even to ourselves, to tell us who we are. All that is good in you is from God and for his glory. And when you can rest in that place, you will neither feel fearful nor proud. Rather, you'll feel grateful and secure. and you'll press on to know this amazing God who gives you so much that he empowers you to live through his son Jesus, to live a life beyond pleasing or fulfilling yourself, because it's only from that place that you'll begin to feel enough, secure in God's love for you. 3 core lies that mess with your mind, your soul, and your spirit. You're not doing enough, you're not getting enough, and you are fundamentally not enough. There is so much more I would love to share with you about healing these core lies, as well as a few others. I want to help you become a God-centered woman, a strong God-centered woman. And if you would like to know more how to work with me in this small group environment, make sure you watch your mailbox for the video tomorrow with all the details. Until then, God bless.